I know you've got an ear out for the start of the podcast, but before we jump into today's episode, I wanted to remind you to keep an eye out for Darryl Lee's limited edition Christmas treats, because they're in stores now. Like the iconic Christmas nougat pudding, so yummy and a gorgeous little gift. And some delicious Chrissy-themed twists on your favourite treats, like the Darryl Lee Rockley Road with chewy red and green jelly pieces, green and red crunchy milk chocolate balls, my favourites, and green apple and strawberry flavoured licorice. Watch them disappear. Your Christmas treats table will pop with colour and scrumptiousness. Spread some joy, bring the fun, and enjoy the Christmas tradition that is Darryl Lee. Hurry before they sell out. Darryl Lee makes Christmas better. Welcome to The Five of My Life with me, Nigel Marsh. As an author, adman and theologian, I've always been interested in people's stories. Not just those with a high profile, but people from all walks of life, regardless of fame. Which is why I created this show. Each guest who takes the 5 of My Life challenge chooses a favourite film, book, song, place and possession. They tell me their choices in advance so I can research them, but they don't tell me why they've chosen them. That's the subject of our conversation. It's amazing what you can learn when discussing someone's 5 choices. I hope you enjoy listening to the show as much as I enjoy making it. David Pocock had a remarkable sporting career. Professional at the tender age of 17, he ended up captaining the Wallabies and being the only Australian player included in World Rugby's Team of the Decade. Yet his story is every bit as fascinating off the field as on, be it his family's traumatic flight from Zimbabwe, his social activism, or his run for the Senate. Driven and inspiring, David is a true warrior both on and off the pitch. So, David, welcome to 5 of My Life, mate.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And you've sent me on a voyage of discovery. Your film, your book and your song were all virgin territory for me. So I suppose, thank you. You are broadening my mind.
No problem. I'm looking forward to chatting about them.
So your first choice on 5 of My Life is always the film. And you've chosen Eternal Enemies, Lions and Hyenas from 1992. Could you explain that, describe it, and then tell us why you've chosen it?
Sure. This was a film that, as a kid, I watched over and over. We used to go and spend holidays on my grandfather's farm. We were farming in the middle of Zimbabwe, and they were right down south on the South African border. So we'd make the 5-hour drive down there and spend the holidays there. My grandfather had an amazing collection of National Geographic VHS tapes. It is VHS, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very hard to get hold of now, yeah. And
one of them was Eternal Enemies, which must have been pretty recent at the time. And my brothers and I just loved it. It was, it was a wildlife documentary, but it wasn't the usual just showing the nice nature, beautiful shots and an interesting storyline. This was sort of brutal nature and a look into what actually happens between lions and hyenas. They shot it in Botswana, I think in Chobe National Park in an area called the Savuti. A really famous filmmaking couple, Derek and Beverly Joubert. I don't know, I've always just enjoyed it. It gave me a real interest in hyenas. They're a fascinating animal, really interesting matriarchal social hierarchy, and a really important sort of mythologically and in terms of stories to many people in Southern Africa. So it's something that captured my imagination. I grew up on a farm loving nature, and this kind of brought something into your living room that you otherwise would never have any idea about or get to see. And I think just at that young age, I found it so exciting.
It was stunning. And the thing, there's so many things that struck me about it. The first would be how it inverted the narrative of a non-farming person like myself. Is you just think that hyenas are the people that hang around after a lion has hunted something, and isn't the predator is the person that pinches the lion's kills, and it's the other way round. And the way that you think all the hunting happens in the day, and if it doesn't, it happens at night. Just there were so many things that the Maasai warriors calling hyenas the doctor, because they can spot the sick and the weak out of a herd, the one they're going to get. And it was so eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would have watched this before I watched The Lion King, which I think did a great disservice to hyena. There's this myth that they are just, these lazy thieves that come and steal food off other predators. Some people are saying that they hunt up to 50% of their prey, and that, as you said, that they are incredible. That they're picking off the weakest animals and playing a really important role in those ecosystems because of their clan structure and the way that they collectively look after pups. They do take a longer time to recover. So yeah, definitely a species I love seeing, and as a documentary, this really captivated me as a young kid, and every now and then I will go back and watch it.
You mentioned The Lion King. The director of The Lion King, Rob Mintoff, cited this documentary as one of the main inspirations for the film, which is so ironic given, as you say, he did such a disservice. But he was quoted as saying, if we can capture 1/10 of the power of that documentary, then The Lion King will be fantastic. But it leads me to want to ask you a question, because the narrative around lions and hyenas that everyone would accept who doesn't understand is wrong, but it's accepted. How do you change narratives in society? It could be climate change, it could be anything, where there is a received wisdom, sort of a lazy generalisation that just goes into the ether. How on earth do you break through and change that in a world where the quality of debate is just mind-rottingly, toxically binary? You've got sort of an unaccountable sloganeering on social media. You've got people hectoring opponents or preaching to the choir. Nobody's listening. Everyone's trying to confront rather than convert. All your wonderful work and causes, does it get you down? Are you full of hope? How do you actually get a message out there?
Well, I think one of the things that does resonate with people is storytelling. As humans, our lives revolve around stories, our cultural stories, our family stories, the stories we tell ourselves about our lives, the things that we're doing. Facts don't seem to change behavior if you look at the last little while with just how much we know about these big challenges. So I think storytelling needs to be part of it. And in that, we need to be telling bigger stories that actually speak to the kind of future we can have, rather than just talking about what we're against, what we don't want. Let's actually try and spark our imaginations, have conversations about what we do want, how we can actually get there. There are a number of people really doing good work in that area. Someone like Damon Gamo with his 2040 and more recently Regenerating Australia, actually saying to people, hang on, this is a big opportunity. We can actually deal with these challenges in a way that turns them into an opportunity to create a better future for all of us. It's a harder thing to do. It does require nuance. There's not a lot of room for nuance in social media or a 24-hour news cycle. But I think more and more people are searching for that. Maybe to bring it back to politics and the election. For me, the interest in independence is seeing people who are actually in there for the right reasons, who don't have to be in politics, but want to do this, want to actually represent their community on these issues and look beyond the next news poll or the next election and say, well, hang on, where do we want to head in the next decade, in the next 2 decades? There's very little sort of big, important work that can be completed in 2 or 3 years. So it's a hard thing to do, but I think more and more people are recognizing that and joining these conversations.
That's a great answer. The power of storytelling, but storytelling that is positive and long-term. There's a Walt Whitlam quote, which is, "The powerful play of life goes on, and you may contribute a verse." there's this history that goes on forever. And are we going to be that generation that just ballses it up for everyone else? Or are we actually going to contribute something positive?
It reminds me of a Rebecca Solnit quote. I'll probably butcher it, but it's something like, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the slow sideways path on a world without end. And it kind of speaks to how much we get caught up in this doom and gloom and, it's the end of the world, rather than saying, well, hang on, this is actually about the kind of future that we are creating every day. And we do have the agency, and it's an incredible thing for us to have all this information and to have the technology and the ideas to actually deal with these big problems. We're clearly missing the leadership, the long-term thinking, and the political will. But that's we can change that.
Talking about leadership, way back when I was a young man, I studied Friedrich Nietzsche for a dissertation, and he said it's possible to listen to a point of view you wholeheartedly approve of, only to find yourself violently disagreeing solely because of the manner in which it is expressed. To have a change, you've got to talk to people who you might violently disagree with and not particularly want to invite for dinner. But that's where the change is.
Yeah, and more than ever, as humans, we can exist within these echo chambers where, on social media or wherever it is, we're surrounded by people with the same opinions. And if you look at some of the, really scary stuff around social media algorithms, they're actually sending you further and further towards whichever your leaning is. We need to create more space for actual debate in public life, move away from this sort of cancel culture and shouting matches, and actually talk about things that are important to us and really affect our lives and are a big part of, I think, creating the kind of communities and society that we want.
Well, and that's why it's sensational that people like yourself are running for office, because you get the sense that, it's not a job, it's not, hectoring, it's because you believe in some things that might make the world better over the long term. But we're going to move on to your second choice on Five in My Life. Wow, I don't know whether to thank you or criticise you, because I just went down a rabbit hole. My wife said, what are you reading now? What are you watching now? Because your book choice is The Call of the Reed Warbler by Charles Massey in 2017. Gosh. Tell us about that.
For anyone interested in agriculture or food or just our future here in Australia, I cannot recommend Charles Massey's book Call of the Reed Warbler enough. I grew up on a farm in Zimbabwe. Both sides of my family have been involved in farming for a long time, and so it is an interest. I studied at university. I've got a master's in sustainable agriculture, and we're seeing this seismic shift in agriculture after a couple hundred years in Australia of working against nature, of trying to beat the land into submission. We're now seeing new thinking, which is really also ancient thinking and methods of actually working with nature, of working to enhance natural systems and at the same time produce the food and fiber that we need. And someone like Charlie Massey is at the forefront of this. We've got a number of leaders here in Australia, and I just thought it was a brilliant book, the way he weaves in his personal story of, I guess, moving back to the farm, taking it over as a young man, grappling with how to pay the bills, then finding this different way of farming, which takes a big shift in mindset from just going down sort of a formula where you add this fertilizer and then that helps with the grass, to actually saying, well, this is actually about managing a really complex system, which takes a lot of learning and being able to read the landscape, work with it. But I think ultimately it is the way of the future, and there's all sorts of studies now coming out showing that ecologically how beneficial it is, but also socially. You've got farmers who feel more connected to the land and also more connected to other farmers, learning from each other, being part of land care groups. So I'm really excited about the future of agriculture in Australia if we can embrace this sort of thinking. And it's always been really concerning to me, this divide in Australian politics and the way we talk about farmers and the environment. Most farmers I know love the land that they farm, and we've got to be working with farmers and incentivize better land management practices and ensure that they're part of the solution to the climate and biodiversity crises that we're facing.
It's just an amazing book. There's so many phrases in it. One is industrial agriculture is warfare against nature. And you go, wow, another one is about we're creating drug addict plants. I found it actually quite sort of hopeful. All those pictures of, one farmer's land that's verdant, and then there's a fence, and the next farmer's is a dust bowl. And it's because the first farmer's been doing regenerative farming. He's been working with nature. It gave me hope that it can change, people can change, but it also got me down a rabbit hole for the Save Soil movement. Oh my word, I don't know if you're across that. I mean, I'd never bloody heard of it, but the notion that topsoil is a living organism, and in the last century we have destroyed 52% of the planet's topsoil. So there are people going, it's a crime against humanity. We are killing topsoil. And people go, who cares, because I live in a city. You go, well, you are going to care, or your grandkids are, because if there's no topsoil left, we are all rooted. You go, first of all, it was the atmosphere, then it was the oceans, now it's the bloody topsoil. I don't know what to be worried about next. Help me, David.
Yeah, one of the things that I guess maybe drew me to the book and why I enjoyed it so much is that over the years I've had so many conversations with my own dad about the way that we farmed in Zimbabwe and how differently we would do things given what we now know. As humans, we don't like change. The hardest thing to change is probably those sort of cultural mindsets and intergenerational knowledge that's been passed down. And you look at farming, and it's very much based on that knowledge that's passed down through generations. So this conversation is a hard one, as Charlie Massey points out in his book. And a lot of the people who have embraced this and become leaders, there was some sort of turning point or tragedy that made them sit down and go, oh, hang on, why am I doing this? We obviously don't want everyone to have to face a tragedy, and we've got to be furthering the conversation, incentivizing it, ensuring that the fear-mongering and the vested interests don't win out, because this is a huge opportunity for all Australians, the way we're managing land. Farmers and pastoralists manage 50% of the continent. So we can have a really big income by supporting farmers who are farming in a more regenerative way, and in making sure that the government is supporting farmers who want to move in that direction.
If you go to a farmer who has been doing industrial agriculture and destroying the topsoil and his land, and you can convert him or her, that's the person who will change the world. Another Nietzsche quote for you. God, this was in 1895. The world is beautiful, but has a disease called man.
That's the challenge, and that's the opportunity for us, is to be part of this change, this move towards actually looking after these amazing places that we live, playing our part as stewards to actually hand over the world in a better place to future generations, which I think most people want to do. This shouldn't be a radical agenda. This should be about meeting our own needs, living great lives, but ensuring that future generations can do the same.
Oh, absolutely. It's wonderful seeing your face light up when you talk about this. And it's about being part of nature, not dominating it, not destroying it. We're going to stay in 2017, mate, for your third choice. And I'm going to tell you a story before I reveal to our listeners what the choice is. Because to my shame, I mean, I'm old, you're young, I had never heard of the song, and I had never heard any of the band's songs. So I called up my son and I told him what you had chosen. He's a bit of a Pocock fan. And he said to me, Dad, you have to promise me that you don't listen to the song, you listen to the whole album that it's on in a row in one session, and it's the last song, and you have to listen it. And I thought, oh, bloody hell, I'm doing so much research on this bloody man, if you insist. So I sat down and listened to this 16-song masterpiece, and then the song that you have chosen, which we're going to add, obviously, to the Spotify playlist, the 5 One Life playlist, it was genuinely like a religious experience. It floored me. I just knocked me on my backside. You have chosen Say Yes to Life by Gang of Youths.
And stick a finger in their faces when they say you're overblown. Say yes to sin. Say yes to pain. Say yes to sticking with the city through 1,000 days of rain. Say yes to grace. Say no to spite. Say yes to this. Say yes to you. Say yes to me. Say yes to love. Say yes to life.
Well, that was sage advice from your son. It's an incredible album, and it is sort of crafted where each song seems to flow in to the next. I mean, this is one of my favorite bands. I just love what they do. I love Dave Leo Pepe, the lead singer, the way that he crafts the lyrics. You know, it probably speaks to that sort of saying that the most personal is actually the most universal. Like, if you can actually talk about the things that you struggle with as a human, most people can relate. We have so much in common, and I don't know. This song just speaks to me. I love the lyrics. It sounds great, and I mean, what a I don't know, what a message, you know. Say yes to life.
Yeah, hope, optimism, love, unity, the power of the human spirit to overcome. There's a couplet in it that made me think about you and this future conversation with it. It's okay, don't fear, go be part of the news sincere. And I just, you know, as in, like, be the change you want to see in the world, you know, say yes to life. You know, yes, it is confusing. Yes, there are troubles, you know, but, you know, there is a new sort of growing consciousness that it hasn't got to be how it's always been. And you know, join in. And I think you're doing that, mate, and more power to you. But it makes me want to ask you a question, because of the band's roots. I didn't know them from a bar of soap. They are sensational. I have been listening to all their back catalogue, so thank you for that. It is that their roots were from their church, and they identify as Christians. I mean, they did. I don't know if they still do. Would you mind talking about your religious journey?
To me, it really is about community and people. One of my heroes is Desmond Tutu, who did so much in South Africa to stand up against apartheid, and then, you know, when South Africa was on the edge socially in the transition out of apartheid after their first democratic election, did a huge amount in trying to unite people. And his message is all about how much we have in common. To me, it's one that resonates, you know, having been involved in professional sport for a decade and a half, where you're with a group of people from different backgrounds, different belief systems, you realize that we have so much more in common than politicians or, you know, some people in the media would like us to believe, and try and divide us and use fear. I think when we actually acknowledge that we are different, and that's actually a strength, but that we do have so much in common, and we can work together with people that we may not agree with or potentially even like. We can work together because ultimately we mainly want similar things, you know, to feel valued, to be safe, to be able to have a good life with our families, all these sorts of things that are so fundamental to the human experience.
What unites us is far more important than what divides us. And I love hearing you talk about Desmond Tutu, because I haven't got a clue what he actually believed in terms of his theology, and I don't care. You judge a man or a woman by his or her actions. And we had the Rabbi Kamins on Five of My Life. He was sensational. And we were talking about actually just judge someone by what they do. What was the verse that you wrote in the Great Symphony of Life? But don't get me started. Don't get me started. We're going to move on to your fourth choice. Now, mate, you've messed with the format because you've chosen the second longest river in Australia, 1,400 kilometres long, the Murrumbidgee River. Could you please tell us why you've chosen that on Five of My Life?
Well, the Murrumbidgee runs through the ACT, and from where I live in Canberra, it's about 20 minutes to the closest stretch of it. And it's an incredible river. I love spending time there. We're really fortunate here in the ACT where pretty much all of the river is part of nature reserves as it comes through the ACT. So there's great access, good walking trails. You can swim in summer. Winter you can also swim. It's a bit chillier. But I often say when I'm out there with my wife Emma, people spend thousands of dollars to fly across the world to enjoy these sorts of places, and we've got it on our doorstep. It's such a privilege, and something I love doing. You're 20 minutes away, you can be away from everything. There's no mobile reception down there, which is a bonus, and you can really just get away for the morning. Or if you want to camp, there's some campgrounds along there you can hike. So just somewhere in Canberra that I love getting to.
Now, are you still a bird nut, or is my research old? I probably shouldn't use the word nut. A bird lover.
No, I love birds. I'm certainly not. I'm not Twitcher level. I can't tell you every bird just based on its call, but I do love them. Growing up, my dad loved birds. He'd grown up doing a lot of falconry. He passed that love of birds on to me. And then my grandfather, my mum's dad, was big into his birding. Spent a lot of time with an old pair of binoculars around my neck and a bird book off trying to find some mayor's parrot or whatever it was in Zimbabwe that I thought was a cool bird to look at.
Well, that is the perfect link to your fifth and final choice on Five of My Life, David, which is usually my favourite one. It's people's possession. And you've chosen your grandfather's compass. Would you please describe it and tell us why you've chosen it?
Yeah, it is an amazing old compass. It's one of those old oil compasses. The story behind it is when my grandfather, my dad's dad, died when I was 2 or 3. And so my dad moved back and was farming with his brother. And my grandmother lived with us. She was a huge part of my life. She was really into her craft, so we'd spend a lot of time doing crafts with her. And then in 1998, so I would have been in grade 4 or 5, she moved to Canada to join my aunt who lived there. And before she left, as a 10-year-old, she gave me my grandfather's compass. And I've always just been so fascinated by it. He used it, he was farming and also mining, and so he would use it to navigate through the bush and sort of set up fence lines and all that sort of thing, which is now kind of another world given GPS technology and Google Maps and satellites and all the rest. So I don't know. I guess it's a connection to someone that I didn't know, but I've heard a lot about. Even though I didn't know him, he's obviously shaped a lot of my life, and I feel like I have a connection to him. And so I guess it's a symbol of that connection, and something that I carry with me.
And you talk about connection to the past. Is your story, which has been quite extensively written about? Gosh, it's the flight from Zimbabwe. Wow, to have lived sort of two, pre and post lives. That's That's an unusual and remarkable story. The legacy of that for you, I think you mentioned you started a sort of therapy journey in 2012. Is that right? Are you at peace with it, or are there still challenges that you have with that experience and that having happened to your family? Or,
I mean, looking back on it, as a kid, I never dreamed that we would leave Zimbabwe. It was home. It was what I knew. I loved living there, and things changed politically very quickly. In the space of a few years, we were kicked off our farm. The president was saying that white farmers should leave the country, were no longer wanted. I guess that period of uncertainty and trauma, I don't know, maybe forces you to grow up a bit quicker and deal with things that kids probably shouldn't have to deal with. And I think our family arrived in Brisbane in 2002, all carrying our own issues, and so it has been a journey coming to peace with that. And I've found it really helpful having older, wiser people to actually talk it through. I've been so grateful for the opportunities I've had here in Australia. I'm grateful for my upbringing in Zimbabwe, and I've tried to give back there over the years through various initiatives and projects. And I guess now, running as an independent, when you love somewhere, you want to make it better. You want to contribute, and that's what I want to do here in Australia and here in Canberra is represent a community that I love, and actually be accountable to them and work together to try and improve our democracy and this amazing country that we get to call home.
Well, you are a dead set inspiration, mate. And I have loved this conversation, but on one level it's been agony because I am a total rugby nut. And the format of Five of My Life is we follow the guests' choices and the stories behind them. So I'm going to have to set up another podcast where I'm just going to spend 4 hours asking you all the questions I want to ask.
Sorry, Nigel. I should have included a few rugby things.
I'm getting Stu Dickinson on in a couple of weeks' time, who I asked him about you, and he said nice things. We've had John Eales on, who was hilarious and wonderful. But we're coming to the 6th trick question, which is, who would you like to hear on Five of My Life next, and why?
Well, I'd probably go Dave the Pepe from Gang of Youths. I'd be interested to hear him answer some of these questions.
And how much talent in one person. How unfair is that?
Oh man, he's phenomenal. And you got to try and see them live. It is a spectacle. Like he is him and his band are amazing live. So glad you enjoyed them.
David Pocock, you are an absolute legend. Thank you so much for sharing your choices on Five of My Life.
Thank you so much for this, Nigel. I've really enjoyed it.